Welcome to CPTM Smart Partners Hub, and in fact, the chat room in the CPTM Smart Partners Hub in London. This is the last broadcasting that we are making as part of the countdown towards the 20th anniversary of CPTM and Smart Partnership Movement, which will culminate next week with the annual general meeting, the award for the companions as part of the special anniversary of CPTM and the movement, and obviously the think tanking, the typical think tanking session, and the other typical open house session. So welcome to the CPTM Smart Partners Hub, and in particular welcome to Alan. Alan Bryden is, as one of our fellows emeritus mentioned to me, known among others as a Scot, and that's why probably he wears...
A Scot living in Paris.
Scot living in Paris, and that's why he wears a tie, which
yeah,
is...
from my clan, in fact.
But welcome to Alan. He's very much leading one of the key inclusive initiatives in the Smart Partnership movement in the last so many years. So, welcome Alan. Now, we are trying to use the last broadcasting, obviously as we promised, in relation to the specific initiatives that will take place next week, but also in relation to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, which is taking place in Malta, and in fact the summit itself with the head of the Commonwealth, Her Majesty, the Queen, and heads of government representatives will be opening tomorrow afternoon, Friday, in Malta, the two-day sessions of the Commonwealth Heads of Government. So, as you know, the 20th anniversary of CPTM marks also the establishment by Commonwealth Heads of Government in 1995 in New Zealand, in Auckland, of the CPTM. So it is quite significant that the briefing of 20 years of work of CPTM, which has been made to each and every head of government and the Commonwealth Group as a whole, is being looked into by the summit, and we take this opportunity also on the eve of the Commonwealth Heads of Government, on the eve of our anniversary, to release a press release which will be sent in about 1 hour. It is 11:30 now in London, on 26th of November, and we hope that various media houses, as well as those who participate in covering the summit in Commonwealth Heads of Government, and those media Smart Partners who are part of the Smart Partners Media Link in Swaziland, in Uganda, in Barbados, in Malaysia, etc. They are also able to pick up the press release, which will be released in about an hour London time. So just in time of the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, but also just in time for the 20th anniversary events, which are going to start at the CPTM Smart Partners Hub in London. Probably we could say they started today, because Alan already came to try to find out in what way he could contribute, as usually, towards a more successful anniversary of our movement. So obviously the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting this year in Malta is taking place at a very special moment in the in all sorts of ways. First of all, we refer to this G-Smart, the smart globe, in the movement as the expression of peace and development all over the smart, transparent globe. And we were actually in the last few years reflecting on this, and we hope that next week the various sessions and interactions, think tanking and companions, will also add to this static, three-dimension otherwise, although very much epitomizing networks, the dynamism of the networks, and also the possibility of reflecting on the digital technologies that are making a big impact in the global governance, positive and negative. And obviously, all of us were very much associated with the sadness that Paris families and France as a whole also went through the other day. And it's not only in Paris and in France, in Tunisia, there are so many confusions, one would say. And probably it is also due to the fact that the idea of smart partnership is not being kind of emerging in a way that we ourselves in the movement thought that we could promote it. Although Nobel Prize this year of Peace has been given to dialogue in Tunis, but it may not have been quite a smart partnership dialogue yet, or a relationship of that type. So we have a big responsibility, and for that reason the theme of our anniversary is called Why Smart Partnership Grows, looking at limitless, reflecting to reality and making sense of complexity. So Alan, other things are taking place also next week in Paris, but tell us, how did you think that the smart partnership could emerge even more specifically related to the transformation that are taking place in relation to limitless opportunities, but also to limits and challenges that are brought in vis-à-vis digital technology? Alan.
Well, first on the sad subject of the Paris attacks, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all those smart partners who have really shown solidarity and sent messages, and we have seen an overwhelming support for France around the world, and this in itself is a network. When you see the French flag on all the monuments around the world, I mean, it warms your heart. So thank you for all those who have thought of France, and we are not the only ones. So and the answer, one of the answers, not the answer, the only answer, but one of the answers is precisely this sort of smart partnership approach, where you collaborate positively within a country, internationally, to find solutions for economic and social transformation. So one aspect which is particularly topical is the COP21 meeting in Paris as of next Sunday. We will have 40 or 50,000 people. You can imagine.
That is taking place immediately when the conferences were in Malta. Finishing.
So it's an intensive moment for collaboration to, save the planet. So in the Smart Partnership movement, we have been developing this Quality and Standards Inclusion Initiative, and it's particularly relevant to the subject, in fact, of fighting the effects of climate change, because the standards and quality provide metrics, and we need metrics to set objectives, to agree on objectives among the various members of society, or at the level of a country. When you set objectives, you have to agree on the way you're going to measure if you have achieved the objectives. The second aspect is good practices, and this is also something that the Smart Partnership can promote, good practices in energy efficiency, in environmental management, and there are international standards for that can be used for education and implementation in companies. And then the third aspect, which is relevant to what we are doing, is using quality and standards to promote and transfer technologies, because the response to the effects of climate change goes with the use of new technologies, whether new energy sources, whether more energy efficient sources. So I think that this particular international conjunction of meetings, the Commonwealth, the COP21, and also the intensive diplomatic activity around the response to terrorism and so on, makes us, the Smart Partnership Movement, particularly relevant.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Alan, I was about a month ago at the annual meeting of the Conference of the Club of Rome, which is known even today for the limits to growth in 1972, putting on the agenda, global agenda, the environment as such because of limits to resources and other factors. But I was obviously struck by members' perception, not on the importance of the issue and the way science and politicians are dealing with, but particularly in relation to the forthcoming COP21, but particularly on the already kind of skepticism of the kind of thing that will come from COP21 because of the global disorder and global order, which cannot be managed, as we were discussing a bit before, in the way we managed it before. So most of the issues, such important issues as environment, are related or referred to structures, yeah, which are not those structures that are actually could support the ethos and the spirit and the practical aspects of the way people actually are trying to contribute towards saving the planet.
Mm-hmm.
So but I was disappointed that the only thing that within, and I made very clear that the only thing that the Club of Rome wanted to do was simply to be present in their personal capacity. I could have been present there, but not to re-emphasize the message vis-à-vis the actually limits of governance, global governance, because the same message with a few changes of limits to growth could be re-articulated in relation to limits to governance, global governance. And that is the message from COP21, particularly in Paris. The other aspects that took place, by the way, also expresses the same thing. So there is a limit to global order as we know it, because we don't take on board probably and articulate a new global governance for a new global order. Never mind the fact that it's such an important issue, saving the planet. So what do you think about that? Because I have been Secretary General of ISO. ISO itself was an international, is an international, very important organization, which make a big impact, probably bigger than those that we are expecting them to undertake the practical aspects of the environment issues.
Well, in the past 15 years, ISO has developed a toolbox of solutions, but of course the solutions have to be taken up by those who are supposed to implement them. So I think that one aspect which strikes me is that the consciousness of the citizens, because the effects of climate change are becoming visible. 2015 will be the hottest year we have ever had on the planet, the hottest year. And we've had a number of catastrophes that strike the imagination of the people. So I think that if you believe in democracy, I mean, the citizens are much more conscious that something has to be done. So there is pressure, a bottom-up pressure on the politicians to come up with solutions. The two main outcome which I expected from the COP21 next week in Paris is one, to have an agreement that countries set objectives for reducing their impact on the greenhouse gases emissions. And this has something to do with national visions, and this is a subject that we deal with in the Smart Partnership movement. So that we should, as smart partners involved in the shaping and national visions and making them happen, make sure that national visions take on board these objectives to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So that's one aspect. We will see how it fares. About 150 countries have come up with objectives for their own reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and so on. So let's hope next week they manage to come to some binding agreement. There is also this concept that every 5 years you should review if you have achieved the objectives and so on. The second big subject at stake next week is money, in fact. Because it's going to take a lot of money to finance the investments necessary to mitigate or reduce the effects of climate change, especially in poor and developing countries. So we will see. You may remember that in Copenhagen a few years ago it was said that we should dedicate $100 billion per year for investing in new technologies and reducing emissions of greenhouse gases and so on. So we will see what happens next week in terms of actually dedicating the money. Now, some money will be dedicated, and now you have to use it intelligently, smartly, and this is where the Smart Partnership comes in, so that the diffusion of that money is not stopped somewhere, but it's really used to invest in energy efficiency, in water efficiency, in low water agriculture and so on. So we have a responsibility also coming up from this second objective of next week is make the best use of the investment that we are going to make to respond to climate change or changes.
Obviously that just one other thing. The intelligent use of the money and the research that is being done and the various actions that are being identified, is very dependent on networks. Because again, going to the governance structures, be it a country that is developed or developing or however one define it in whatever part of the globe, the structures, we know as soon as you set them up, and it takes a long time to set up a structure, as soon as it became real, it's already outdated because other things evolve. And that is where the emphasis on networks and distributed, therefore, use, intelligent use, win-win type of both resources and ideas that one has. That is where Smart Partnership comes in. But this is what probably next week, by the way of the 20th anniversary, what we're trying to say is there is a new phase for Smart Partnership movement where, and CPTM, where one doesn't find continuously evidence to prove that Smart Partnership practice is relevant, but in fact one is to find a large initiative with sub-initiatives which actually implement or practice in relation to and make a big impact, because there is no reason by now, after 20 years, to still justify that Smart Partnership is essential in its ethics and its is embedded into the tradition of Swaziland, Lesotho, France, and so on. But then there is something else that needs to happen, and these networks probably need to be even better understood and used. What do you think?
Well, I fully agree, because we have to realize we are going to celebrate an anniversary next week. Of course, we're going to talk about the past, but we must talk about the future, because we have seen in the past 20 years an acceleration of events and trends. When you look, I mean, the Earth is not the same as it was 20 years ago by far, and it probably has changed more in 20 years than in 1 century before. And this is because of new technologies, of the emerging, the big emerging economies, because of urbanization, because of the climate change issue, which was not there 20 years ago. So, and to adjust to that in an accelerating world, we need to exchange. We need to exchange information, exchange experience, and this is where our concept of network, and also I would say another thing which the Smart Partnership brings is the connection between the national vision and making it happen. And if you integrate in national visions all these new issues coming up, security, climate change, energy, urbanization, infrastructures, and so on, I think we can help to find the solutions and implement the solutions more quickly.
Yeah, it's
because there is a matter of urgency for the planet.
This is, well, I mean, the special effort next week that we are making, all our group, to try to bring in besides the anniversary and so on, to bring in under the traditional think tanking and open house, one of the most important issue, which you mentioned it about, the emerging landscape of digital challenges and opportunities in relation to not only financial technology and central banks and Ministry of Finance or banks as such, or statistics or Bureau of Standards, but in relation to all aspects of life. And we realized in the last 3 years, as we were discussing, that since Dar es Salaam, in fact, and our President Kikwete, who will be with us next week, in his first, I understand, or one of the first participation
post-presidential.
as a post-presidential. So we will be very honored to have him. But he, in 2013, if you remember, his obsession, more or less, with anchoring technology or leveraging technology for transformation within the dialogue was manifested, among other things, about in relation to the digital technology of one kind or another that might make an impact. I mean, that was put to the dialogue with heads of government and all the various links and diversity of people who were there, Africa and beyond. And since then, we try to focus in each initiative, financial inclusion, visions, technology inclusion, science advice, quality and standards, to see in what way this is being manifested. So the idea next week would be that through the think tanking we identify signals which can be actually followed in practice and then add to new signals which are relevant to be implemented, but in an intelligent way. We can't say coordinated because you don't quite know what you're coordinating. You only know what you know today and the implications of connections among one technology and another, but you don't quite know what other things will and impacts, new things are emerging. So it's a very different way of delivery and even of a kind of assessing what is it to be delivered, both for the movement but also for national context. So we will look very much forward, Alan, to your special strategic, usually insights that you have from being in ISO, but also being with us for so many years. We do require a very special strategic approach to this, because smart partnership practice is meant to be able to deal with this kind of issue. It would be a pity not to take advantage of it. Yeah. We have open house, but that that is a usual traditional thing.
Let's leave a little suspense on the substance of what we will be discussing. But in a nutshell, we will probably be discussing how the new digital landscape brings solutions where smart partnership approach can accelerate the dissemination. There is a related subject which is maybe not in the remit of the smart partnership, but being it's in the COP21 perspective, is the electrification of developing countries, because you cannot have digital technologies if you don't have access to electricity. So this is another aspect that we must not forget. And for the rest, let's leave a little suspense for next week.
My intention was simply to actually find a document background in which we embedded the whole program, the agenda of the 3 days, and this will be again released today alongside the press release, and I'm very glad that Alan is with us to do so, and we'll see if the quality satisfies you or not. Alan, you're always very pedantic about it, and
pedantic, come on.
We are very sensitive,
pragmatic,
but also pedantic about it. So that's why we try to put the best into it. And alongside, of course, that background, we will have the usual smart notes that will support the various topics in the agenda and during the anniversary, and obviously some smart reading tips and clicks. You will be already having today in advance video recording, which is a hybrid reading tip from Dr. Tim Pearson, the Chief Scientist of the Government Accountability Office, Technology Assessment Unit, who is preoccupied with the study which they were asked to do by the various committees in the US Congress in relation to big data and Internet of Things. So the reason why we are releasing that video recording in advance is because it says it all. It says that even if you are in the United States, or you are in Lesotho, or you are in Malaysia, the issues to do with Internet of Things and big data are probably similar. They are being dealt with in different contexts, but there are similar issues. So we thank very much to Dr. Tim Pearson for a very good introduction and in advance a recording for our program. Finally, I think Alan, once again, we have the broadcasting that this year, smart broadcasting will take place even more intensive than before. Each and every session or sub-session, including the annual general meeting, including the special annual general meeting, including the ceremony of the Companion Awards, the 2000 Companion Awards, and each and every session will be open to participation of the CPTM Smart Partners, including the broadcasting houses to whom we are releasing today the press release. So this is the broadcast program on the smart web, and to finish off with, it's saying here, you are with us, never mind where you are, vous êtes avec nous, and we are with you, nous sommes avec vous. So, look forward to see you next week.
À la semaine prochaine.
Okay.